The steamship Golden Gate churned through San Francisco Bay's gray waters, its deck crowded with immigrants clutching worn possessions. Dr. Amelia Chun Morrison stood at the rail, her medical bag hidden beneath a faded shawl, watching Angel Island grow larger through the morning mist. Her daughter Lily pressed against her side, small fingers tracing the Chinese characters embroidered on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, why are we pretending you're not a doctor?" the 7-year-old whispered. Amelia's throat tightened as she touched the forged marriage certificate in her pocket, her desperate gamble to escape poverty and give Lily a future. The island's quarantine station loomed ahead like a fortress, its yellow flags snapping in the salt wind. Captain Sean O'Malley emerged from the ship's cabin, his weathered hands gripping a letter from his supposed bride. The Irish sea captain had arranged this marriage through correspondence, seeking companionship after years of solitary voyages across the Pacific. His blue eyes scanned the deck until they found Amelia, and he approached with cautious hope. "Dr. Amelia Chun Morrison," he asked, then caught himself. "I mean, Miss Chen." She nodded stiffly, her mixed heritage evident in her delicate features and determined stance. The awkwardness between them was palpable, two strangers bound by necessity, both hiding parts of themselves they feared the other couldn't accept. Health Inspector Reginald Blackwood boarded the ship with theatrical authority, his pristine uniform contrasting sharply with his cold, calculating eyes. He moved through the passengers with practiced efficiency, separating families with arbitrary gestures and stamping papers without examination. "All Chinese and mixed-blood passengers to the quarantine station," he announced, his voice carrying over the anxious murmurs. Amelia felt her carefully constructed plan crumbling as Blackwood's gaze lingered on her and Lily with particular interest. The inspector's smile was predatory as he noted their names on his list, and she sensed something far more sinister than routine health protocols at work. Before we continue, leave your like, share our story, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. The quarantine boat arrived with unusual urgency, its crew wearing elaborate masks and gloves that seemed more theatrical than medical. As Blackwood herded Amelia, Lily, and dozens of other immigrants aboard, Sean stepped forward to claim his bride, only to be roughly pushed back. "The woman and child show signs of Oriental plague," Blackwood declared, though Amelia knew no such symptoms existed. The lie hit her like a physical blow. She watched helplessly as Sean was also forced onto the quarantine boat, supposedly exposed through contact with her. The Golden Gate's whistle echoed mournfully across the bay as their freedom disappeared behind them, and Amelia realized they had walked into a carefully orchestrated trap. Angel Island's quarantine facility stretched before them like a prison, its wooden barracks surrounded by high fences and patrolled by armed guards. Amelia clutched Lily close as they were processed through intake, her medical training, immediately recognizing the absence of proper sanitation protocols for a genuine plague outbreak. The other patients appeared remarkably healthy, their eyes holding the wariness of prolonged captivity rather than illness. A Mexican-American nurse named Isabella Santos moved among them with quiet competence, her knowing glances suggesting she understood more than her official duties required. The facility's true purpose began crystallizing in Amelia's mind. This was no medical quarantine, but something far more profitable and cruel. Sean was separated from Amelia and thrown into a different barracks, his captain's credentials meaningless in this isolated kingdom ruled by Blackwood's whims. Through the thin walls, Amelia could hear his protests growing weaker as the reality of their situation settled over him like fog. Lily clung to her mother's hand, her young mind struggling to understand why they were caged like animals when neither felt sick. The first night brought the sound of machinery from the island's interior, not medical equipment, but the rhythmic pounding of construction and manufacturing. Isabella appeared at their bedside in the darkness, pressing a small piece of bread into Lily's palm, along with a whispered warning: "Trust no one in uniform, but watch everything." Dawn revealed the quarantine station's sinister efficiency as healthy immigrants were marched to work details throughout the island. Amelia watched through barred windows as men built structures and women labored in makeshift factories, all under the guise of therapeutic activity for plague recovery. Her medical knowledge confirmed what her heart already knew: these people weren't sick, they were slaves. Sean caught her eye from across the compound during the morning roll call, his expression mirroring her growing determination to understand and expose this elaborate deception. The fake plague had become their prison, but perhaps their shared professional knowledge could become their key to freedom. When Blackwood offered, Amelia a chance to work in the medical facility rather than the labor gangs. She faced her first crucial decision. Accepting would mean legitimizing the false plague narrative. But refusing would leave her powerless to help the other prisoners or gather evidence of the corruption. She looked at Lily's trusting face, then at Sean's encouraging nod from across the yard, and made her choice. "I'll work in your medical facility, Inspector," she said carefully. "But I maintain the right to examine all patients according to proper protocols." Blackwood's smile was predatory, but he agreed, unaware that he had just given a real doctor access to his entire fraudulent operation. The medical facility's interior confirmed Amelia's suspicions. It was elaborately staged, with outdated equipment and theatrical props designed to fool visiting officials rather than treat actual patients. Isabella showed her around with practiced deference, but their eyes met meaningfully over fabricated medical charts and empty medicine bottles. The plague patients were kept in perfect health through careful nutrition and exercise, their supposed symptoms documented in reports that would never withstand genuine medical scrutiny. Sean was brought in as a deteriorating case, giving Amelia her first chance to examine him properly while maintaining the charade. His strong pulse and clear eyes confirmed that whatever this operation was, it had nothing to do with disease, and everything to do with control. That evening, Isabella slipped Amelia a worn journal, hidden beneath medical supplies pages of carefully recorded observations, documenting months of fraudulent quarantines and illegal labor exploitation. The previous doctor had discovered the truth and tried to expose it before mysteriously succumbing to plague himself, leaving only his hidden notes as evidence. Names, dates, and shipping manifests painted a picture of systematic human trafficking disguised as public health measures. Amelia felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders as she realized she might be the only qualified medical professional in position to expose Blackwood's empire. The journal's final entry was haunting. "They make us complicit in our own imprisonment through fear of a disease that doesn't exist." Sean's engineering knowledge proved invaluable as he secretly mapped the island's true layout during his work assignments, discovering hidden warehouses filled with goods manufactured by unpaid immigrant labor. The quarantine station was actually a sophisticated smuggling operation, using the fear of contagion to create an invisible workforce that officially didn't exist. He shared his findings with Amelia during a staged medical examination, their whispered conversations building both tactical alliance and unexpected personal connection. The Irish captain's steady courage complemented the Chinese-American doctor's analytical mind, creating a partnership that transcended their original arranged marriage. Together, they began planning not just their escape, but the liberation of everyone trapped in Blackwood's manufactured plague. The full scope of the quarantine island's operations became clear when Amelia was granted access to Blackwood's private quarters under the pretense of treating his recurring symptoms. The inspector's office contained shipping schedules, payment records, and correspondence with corrupt officials throughout California's immigration system. Maps on his walls showed similar operations at other isolation facilities, revealing a network of fake quarantine stations harvesting immigrant labor across the West Coast. Amelia memorized every detail while maintaining her role as dutiful medical assistant, realizing she had entered a shadow world where human suffering was monetized through manufactured fear. The stakes had grown beyond personal freedom. Hundreds of families were trapped in this web of deception, and she was perhaps their only hope for exposure and justice. Amelia began building trust among the imprisoned immigrants by providing genuine medical care within the constraints of her false role, treating real ailments while carefully avoiding any treatments that might legitimize the plague narrative. Her mixed heritage allowed her to communicate with Chinese workers in Cantonese, while her medical English gave her credibility with other groups, making her a natural bridge between the facility's diverse population. Sean supported her efforts by organizing work crews that could share information safely, his maritime experience teaching him to read the patterns of guard rotations and supply deliveries. Isabella revealed herself as part of an underground network of employees who had been secretly documenting the operation for months, waiting for someone with enough authority and courage to act on their evidence. Lily's childlike observations proved unexpectedly valuable, as she noticed details the adults missed: guards who never wore their protective gear consistently, medicine that was actually colored water, and the absence of proper burial procedures for supposed plague victims. Her innocent questions forced Amelia to articulate the deception more clearly, strengthening her own understanding of how to expose it. The little girl's presence also humanized Amelia's mission, reminding everyone that children were trapped in this facility along with adults. Sean found himself growing genuinely protective of both mother and daughter, their fabricated family relationship gradually developing real emotional bonds. The arranged marriage was becoming something authentic through shared adversity and common purpose. Isabella introduced Amelia to a hidden network of quarantine station employees, kitchen workers, custodians, and guards who had grown disgusted with Blackwood's operation but feared retaliation if they spoke out alone. These allies provided crucial intelligence about the facility's daily operations, shipping schedules, and the inspector's patterns of behavior. A sympathetic telegrapher named Carlos had been secretly documenting communications between Blackwood and his superiors in San Francisco, creating a paper trail that could expose the entire conspiracy if it reached honest authorities. The group's diversity: Irish, Mexican, Chinese, and Italian immigrants who had found legitimate work on the island, demonstrated the potential for cross-cultural cooperation that Blackwood's divisive tactics sought to prevent. Sean's growing feelings for Amelia complicated their mission, as personal attachment threatened to cloud tactical judgment, but also strengthened his commitment to protecting her and Lily at any cost. Their staged medical examinations became opportunities for deeper conversation, revealing shared values about justice, family, and the courage required to stand against corruption. Amelia found herself trusting Sean with vulnerabilities she had never shared with anyone: her struggles as a mixed-race woman in medicine, her fears about raising Lily alone, and her determination to prove that scientific truth could overcome institutional lies. The captain's respect for her professional competence and personal strength created an emotional foundation that transcended their original arrangement, making their fake marriage feel increasingly real. The discovery of previous plague victims working in mainland factories under assumed identities revealed the full extent of Blackwood's human trafficking network, where quarantined immigrants were eventually sold as indentured servants to employers throughout California. Isabella showed Amelia hidden records of these transactions, documenting how healthy people were systematically disappeared from official records after months of unpaid labor on the island. The realization that they weren't just imprisoned but destined for permanent enslavement added urgency to their plans, especially when they learned that Lily was being prepared for adoption by a wealthy family who had paid Blackwood for a recovered orphan. The fake plague wasn't just stealing their freedom, it was destroying their identities and severing family bonds forever. When Lily developed a genuine fever from the stress and poor conditions, Amelia faced a heartbreaking test of her principles. She could use her daughter's real illness to expose the medical charade, but only by putting Lily at greater risk. Sean's immediate offer to protect both of them, regardless of the consequences, crystallized Amelia's emotional commitment to their cause and their growing family bond. She treated Lily with proper medicine while documenting the differences between real illness and Blackwood's fabricated symptoms, creating medical evidence that could expose the entire operation. Isabella's willingness to risk her position by helping smuggle real medications demonstrated the depth of trust and friendship developing among their resistance network. The moment confirmed that they were no longer fighting just for escape, but for each other and every person trapped in Blackwood's system. Blackwood's suspicions were aroused when several plague patients showed remarkable improvement under Amelia's care, threatening to undermine his carefully constructed medical narrative. The inspector began monitoring her activities more closely, assigning loyalist guards to observe her interactions with patients and limiting her access to medical supplies. Sean's work crews reported increased security measures throughout the island, including new locks on warehouses and additional patrols around communication equipment. The pressure forced their resistance network to accelerate their timeline while becoming more careful about their activities. Knowing that discovery would likely result in their permanent disappearance, Isabella warned that Blackwood was preparing to move several long-term prisoners to mainland facilities, making their window for action critically narrow. A visiting federal health official presented both opportunity and danger when he arrived for a routine inspection of the quarantine facility. Accompanied by a legitimate doctor from San Francisco, Blackwood orchestrated an elaborate performance featuring his most convincing fake patients. But Amelia recognized the visiting physician as Dr. Margaret Wells, a pioneering woman doctor she had studied under years earlier. The reunion was emotional, but dangerous. Dr. Wells immediately recognized Amelia's competence and began asking pointed questions about the facility's medical protocols and patient records. Sean created diversions to give the women private conversation time, while Isabella ensured that the most obviously healthy plague patients were kept away from the official tour. Dr. Wells's presence forced Amelia into a crucial decision about revealing her true identity and medical knowledge, knowing that doing so might expose their entire resistance network but could also provide the external validation needed to shut down Blackwood's operation. The visiting doctor's obvious skepticism about the facility's medical practices gave Amelia hope that legitimate authority might finally intervene on their behalf. Sean encouraged her to take the risk, offering to create a distraction that would give her extended private time with Dr. Wells. Isabella provided additional evidence that the visiting official seemed genuinely concerned about irregularities he had observed, suggesting that not all government representatives were complicit in the corruption. The moment represented their best chance to connect with the outside world and expose the truth to someone with the power to act. The revelation of Amelia's true credentials to Dr. Wells triggered a careful but urgent investigation into the facility's medical records, with the visiting doctor using her authority to demand detailed examinations of supposed plague cases. Blackwood attempted to control the investigation through intimidation and misdirection, but Dr. Wells's expertise exposed numerous inconsistencies in patient charts and treatment protocols. Sean organized work crews to ensure that key witnesses would be available for private interviews, while Isabella provided access to hidden documentation that contradicted official records. The visiting federal official began documenting serious irregularities in facility management and financial accounting, creating official evidence that could survive Blackwood's attempts at cover-up. The investigation represented a turning point, where institutional authority began working for justice rather than oppression. Blackwood's desperation led to increasingly erratic behavior as he realized his empire was crumbling under legitimate scrutiny, prompting him to accelerate plans for moving evidence and eliminating witnesses who could expose the conspiracy. Several resistance network members were suddenly reassigned to more isolated work details, while others received threats about the consequences of speaking to investigators. Amelia found herself torn between protecting her allies and maintaining the investigation's momentum, especially when Blackwood implied that Lily's safety depended on her cooperation. Sean's maritime contacts provided crucial intelligence about planned ship movements that could be used to evacuate evidence and key personnel before the investigation could be completed. The group faced their most dangerous period as Blackwood fought for survival using increasingly desperate and violent tactics. Isabella's discovery of Blackwood's escape plan revealed that the inspector intended to destroy all evidence and eliminate key witnesses through a manufactured plague outbreak that would justify burning the entire facility with everyone inside. The plan's horrific scope demonstrated the lengths to which corrupt authority would go to protect itself, making the stakes personal for everyone on the island. Carlos, the sympathetic telegrapher, risked his life to send coded messages to Dr. Wells's colleagues in San Francisco, alerting them to the immediate danger and requesting urgent intervention. Sean began secretly organizing the strongest workers into security teams that could protect investigators and potential witnesses from Blackwood's increasingly violent enforcers. The fake plague was about to become real in the most terrible way possible. With mass murder disguised as epidemic containment, the crisis escalated when Blackwood's men attempted to seize Lily as leverage against Amelia's cooperation with the investigation, forcing Sean into open confrontation that exposed their resistance network and eliminated any pretense of compliance. The captain's maritime combat experience proved invaluable as he fought off the kidnapping attempt, but the violence shattered their careful strategy of working within the system. Isabella was arrested on fabricated charges of spreading plague contagion, while Carlos was caught sending unauthorized telegrams and threatened with execution for espionage. Dr. Wells found herself isolated and threatened. Her official protection, meaningless in Blackwood's island kingdom where he controlled all communication and transportation. The situation had devolved into open warfare between corrupt authority and desperate prisoners, with the truth as their only weapon against overwhelming force. Amelia's medical knowledge became crucial for treating injuries from the escalating conflict while maintaining the pretense that violence was due to plague delirium rather than organized resistance. Her skills kept their fighters functional and provided cover for their activities. but also forced her into direct confrontation with Blackwood when he demanded she certify deaths that were actually murders. Sean's leadership abilities emerged as he coordinated defensive strategies among the work crews, using his understanding of the island's layout to create safe zones and communication networks. The resistance network expanded as previously neutral employees chose sides, with many choosing to protect the investigators and prisoners despite personal risk. Their arranged marriage had evolved into a genuine partnership where Amelia's intellectual skills and Sean's tactical experience created an effective leadership team. Dr. Wells managed to smuggle out crucial evidence through a supply boat, but not before being forcibly confined by Blackwood's men under the pretext of plague exposure quarantine. Her isolation meant that external rescue was possible but uncertain, leaving the island's prisoners to defend themselves while hoping that help was en route. The legitimate doctor's presence had exposed the medical fraud so thoroughly that Blackwood could no longer maintain the pretense of legitimate health measures, forcing him into open authoritarianism. Isabella's imprisonment became a rallying point for other employees who had remained neutral. As her obvious innocence highlighted the corruption of Blackwood's justice, Sean organized rescue operations that demonstrated his tactical competence while deepening his emotional commitment to protecting everyone the inspector threatened. The discovery of a hidden radio transmitter in Blackwood's quarters provided an opportunity to contact mainland authorities directly, but also revealed the extent of his communication network with corrupt officials throughout California's immigration system. Carlos's technical expertise became invaluable as he worked to establish contact with honest authorities, while avoiding Blackwood's loyalist operators who monitored all transmissions. Amelia used her medical authority to demand access to the radio for emergency consultations with mainland physicians, creating legitimate cover for their communications efforts. The intelligence gathered from intercepted messages revealed that their situation was part of a broader pattern of corruption affecting multiple facilities, making their resistance effort more significant than they had initially realized. Their personal fight for freedom had become part of a larger battle against systematic oppression. Lily's unexpected courage emerged when she volunteered to carry messages between different groups of prisoners, her small size and apparent innocence allowing her to move through the facility unobserved by Blackwood's guards. Her contributions to the resistance network demonstrated that even the youngest victims of oppression could play crucial roles in fighting back, inspiring adults who had begun to despair. Sean's protective instincts toward the little girl strengthened his bond with Amelia, while showing his capacity for fatherhood, transforming their fake family into something authentic and powerful. Isabella's influence from prison continued through coded messages delivered by kitchen workers, proving that moral authority could survive even physical confinement. The network's resilience in the face of increasing pressure showed that genuine community could resist institutional attempts at division and control. The arrival of Captain James Morrison, Amelia's deceased husband's brother, and a U.S. Navy officer investigating reports of illegal detention, provided the external authority and firepower needed to challenge Blackwood's island kingdom directly. His presence validated Dr. Wells's warnings and brought federal law enforcement into direct conflict with the corrupt quarantine system. Morrison's naval expertise complemented Sean's maritime knowledge, creating a formidable alliance capable of coordinating both internal resistance and external intervention. The revelation that legitimate federal authority was aware of the situation and actively working to expose it gave hope to prisoners who had begun to believe they were forgotten by the outside world. Isabella's release became the first concrete sign that justice was possible. As Morrison's authority superseded Blackwood's fabricated medical justifications for imprisonment, Blackwood's final desperate gambit involved attempting to destroy all evidence by burning the facility's records and claiming that a genuine plague outbreak required complete sterilization of the island, including the elimination of all witnesses. His plan revealed the ultimate logic of corruption. When lies could no longer be maintained, violence became the only means of preserving power. Sean and Morrison coordinated defensive strategies that protected both evidence and witnesses while maintaining pressure on Blackwood's remaining loyalists, many of whom began surrendering as federal authority established dominance. Amelia's medical documentation became crucial legal evidence proving the systematic nature of the fraud. While her treatment records showed that proper medical care could have prevented the deaths Blackwood had attributed to plague, the inspector's increasing desperation made him more dangerous. but also more vulnerable to the justice that was rapidly closing in around him. The coordinated rescue operation began with Morrison's naval forces securing the island's perimeter, while Sean led internal teams that protected investigators and evidence from Blackwood's final attempts at destruction. Amelia worked frantically to compile medical evidence that would stand up in federal court, her documentation becoming the foundation for legal cases that could shut down similar operations throughout the West Coast. Isabella's knowledge of the facility's internal operations proved invaluable for locating hidden evidence and identifying victims who could testify about their experiences. The resistance network that had developed organically under pressure now functioned as an efficient intelligence-gathering organization, providing detailed information about Blackwood's crimes and the extent of his conspiracy. Their personal relationships had created institutional capability that transcended individual survival. Dr. Wells's freedom allowed her to coordinate with federal investigators, providing medical expertise that definitively disproved the plague narrative while documenting the health impacts of prolonged imprisonment under false pretenses. Her professional authority gave legitimacy to Amelia's findings, creating an unshakable medical case against Blackwood's operation. The two women doctors represented the power of professional competence and ethical commitment to overcome institutional corruption, their collaboration demonstrating how expertise could serve justice when properly supported. Carlos's communication records provided detailed evidence of conspiracy extending far beyond Angel Island, implicating officials throughout California's immigration system. The technical evidence complemented medical documentation, creating a comprehensive case for federal prosecution that Blackwood could neither deny nor destroy. Blackwood's final confrontation with Amelia occurred in the medical facility where he attempted to force her to sign documents retroactively legitimizing his quarantine decisions, threatening Lily's life if she refused compliance. The moment tested everything Amelia had learned about courage, professional integrity, and the power of truth to overcome institutional lies. Sean and Morrison's arrival during the standoff demonstrated that she was no longer alone against corrupt authority, while Isabella's presence showed that moral courage could inspire others to take similar stands. The inspector's defeat came not through violence but through the complete exposure of his lies, as federal investigators presented overwhelming evidence of fraud, human trafficking, and abuse of governmental authority. Amelia's transformation from desperate mail-order bride to confident leader of resistance was complete, her professional and personal strength having overcome both systematic oppression and individual despair. The systematic documentation of evidence began immediately as federal investigators worked with the liberated prisoners to build comprehensive legal cases against Blackwood and his network of corrupt officials. Amelia's medical expertise proved invaluable for establishing the fraudulent nature of the plague quarantines, while her patient records provided detailed evidence of systematic abuse and neglect. Sean coordinated with naval personnel to secure all physical evidence and ensure that no records could be destroyed or tampered with during the transition to federal control. Isabella led efforts to care for prisoners who needed medical attention. After months of deprivation, her nursing skills complemented by Amelia's physician knowledge, the immediate aftermath of liberation required careful attention to both physical and legal needs of people who had been systematically dehumanized by Blackwood's operation. Morrison's investigation revealed the full scope of the conspiracy, connecting Angel Island's fake quarantine to similar operations throughout California and potentially other western states. The systematic nature of the fraud required extensive federal response, with teams of investigators, medical professionals, and legal experts working to identify all victims and prosecute all perpetrators. Amelia found herself appointed as a special medical consultant to the federal investigation, her expertise in both traditional Western medicine and understanding of immigrant health needs, making her uniquely qualified to assess the damage done by fraudulent quarantines. Sean's maritime knowledge helped investigators trace shipping records and identified the routes used to transport victims to mainland facilities, expanding the case into international waters and federal maritime law. Their personal story had become part of a larger narrative about corruption, justice, and the power of ordinary people to resist systematic oppression. The exposure of the quarantine fraud triggered widespread reform of immigration, health procedures throughout California, with legitimate medical professionals replacing corrupt officials and proper protocols replacing theatrical performances. Dr. Wells led efforts to establish genuine medical facilities that could protect public health without victimizing immigrants, while Amelia contributed her understanding of cross-cultural medical practices and community health needs. Isabella received recognition for her courage in documenting abuses, leading to her promotion within a reformed medical system that valued integrity over compliance. Carlos's technical expertise was employed to establish communication systems that could prevent future isolation and abuse of detained immigrants. The transformation of Angel Island from prison to legitimate processing facility demonstrated that institutional change was possible when corruption was completely exposed and systematically replaced. Blackwood's trial became a national sensation, as newspapers across the country reported on the systematic fraud and abuse that had masqueraded as public health protection, forcing broader examination of immigration policies and procedures. Amelia's testimony as both victim and expert witness proved crucial for establishing the medical impossibility of the inspector's plague claims. While her documentation provided incontrovertible evidence of deliberate deception, Sean's account of the island's true operations exposed the economic motives behind the fake quarantine, showing how human trafficking had been disguised as medical necessity. The legal proceedings validated their resistance efforts, while demonstrating that individual courage could successfully challenge institutional corruption when supported by legitimate authority and thorough investigation. Justice was not only served but seen to be served, providing closure for victims while deterring similar crimes. The final confrontation came not in physical violence but in the complete exposure of truth that demolished every aspect of Blackwood's constructed reality, as federal prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence of his crimes, while survivors testified about their experiences. Amelia's moment of greatest triumph occurred when she presented her medical analysis to the court, definitively proving that no plague had ever existed on Angel Island, and that every quarantine decision had been fraudulent. Sean's testimony about the island's industrial operations showed how systematic exploitation had masqueraded as public health protection, while Isabella's documentation revealed the human cost of the inspector's greed and corruption. Lily's presence in the courtroom reminded everyone that children had been among Blackwood's victims, making his crimes not just legal violations, but moral outrages that demanded the strongest possible response. The truth had proven more powerful than institutional authority, professional intimidation, or physical threats. Blackwood's conviction and imprisonment marked the end of his corrupt empire, but also the beginning of broader reforms that would prevent similar abuses throughout the immigration system. The inspector's downfall demonstrated that no individual, regardless of official authority, was above the law when their crimes were thoroughly documented and properly prosecuted. Amelia's role in the investigation led to her appointment as a medical consultant for immigration reform, allowing her to use her professional expertise for systematic change rather than individual treatment. Sean's maritime experience proved valuable for establishing new procedures that would protect immigrants during transportation, while preventing the isolation that had made Blackwood's crimes possible. Their personal victory had created institutional change that would protect future generations of immigrants from similar exploitation and abuse. The liberation of all prisoners from Angel Island required extensive coordination between federal agencies, medical professionals, and community organizations to ensure that everyone received proper care and legal assistance. Many of the immigrants who had been trapped in the fake quarantine found legitimate employment in California, their skills and determination recognized rather than exploited. Isabella established a network of support services for former prisoners, helping them navigate legal systems and access medical care while rebuilding their lives after months of systematic abuse. Carlos used his communication skills to maintain contact between survivors, creating a community of mutual support that transcended the ethnic divisions Blackwood had tried to exploit. The island itself was transformed into a legitimate immigration processing facility that prioritized human dignity and legal rights over bureaucratic control and economic exploitation. The establishment of proper immigration medical procedures throughout California created a new standard for treating newcomers with dignity and respect while maintaining legitimate public health protections. Amelia's integration into the reformed system allowed her to practice medicine openly while contributing to policy development that balanced individual rights with community safety. Sean found new purpose in working with federal agencies to improve maritime immigration procedures, his experience as both sea captain and resistance leader making him uniquely qualified to understand the needs of people traveling to America for new opportunities. Their marriage, which had begun as a desperate arrangement between strangers, had evolved into a genuine partnership based on shared values, mutual respect, and common commitment to justice. Lily grew up knowing that her mother's courage had not only saved their family but contributed to its systematic changes that would protect other immigrant families from similar exploitation. 1 year after their liberation, Amelia established a medical practice in San Francisco that served both immigrant communities and established residents, her expertise in cross-cultural healthcare making her one of the city's most respected physicians. Her integration into the medical establishment demonstrated that professional competence could overcome prejudice when supported by institutional reform and community recognition. Sean's shipping company specialized in safe, dignified transportation for immigrants, using his maritime expertise to ensure that the journey to America began with respect rather than exploitation. Their business partnership reflected their personal relationship complementary skills working toward shared goals that benefited both individual success and community welfare. Isabella joined Amelia's practice as head nurse, their professional collaboration continuing the friendship that had sustained them through their darkest moments on Angel Island. The Angel Island facility became a model for humane immigration processing, with Dr. Wells serving as its director and implementing medical procedures that protected genuine public health while respecting individual dignity. Amelia served as a consulting physician, ensuring that cross-cultural medical practices were properly understood and implemented throughout the reformed system. Sean's maritime expertise contributed to improved transportation procedures that eliminated the isolation and vulnerability that had made Blackwood's crimes possible. Carlos established a communication system that maintained contact between the facility and mainland communities, preventing the information blackouts that had hidden systematic abuse. Their individual transformations had contributed to institutional change that reflected their values of competence, integrity, and service to human dignity over bureaucratic power. Lily Chun Morrison grew up to become a lawyer specializing in immigrant rights, her childhood experience of systematic injustice inspiring a career dedicated to protecting vulnerable people from institutional abuse. Her mother's courage in exposing the Angel Island fraud became family legend, but more importantly, it demonstrated that individual integrity could create lasting change when supported by community, solidarity, and legitimate authority. Sean and Amelia's marriage proved that relationships based on mutual respect and shared values could overcome artificial barriers of culture, circumstance, and initial arrangement. Their story became part of California's history, not as victims of corruption but as examples of how ordinary people could resist systematic oppression and create institutional change. The freedom they won through exposing lies had become a foundation for justice that extended far beyond their personal liberation, touching the lives of countless immigrants who would never experience the exploitation and abuse that had once masqueraded as public health protection on Angel Island.